All right, guys. Today in my home garage, we're going over a '05 BMW 330xi E46 platform. So we got check engine lights, engine mounts, some seals. We're gonna over the whole vehicle. Then we're gonna make a plan as to what we're gonna fix. So first, okay, guys. So let's go over everything wrong with the vehicle. We'll start here. We had a previous leak from the O-rings inside this cooler. It doesn't look like it's leaking anymore, but we're going to replace it as a preventative measure because we still do have the green incorrect coolant in this BMW. Last year we replaced this transmission cooler lines, and maybe we moved this around too much and some coolant leaked out and it made it look like a leak. So that's going to be one thing we do. We already changed these pulleys up here. There is no noise now. I just took the belt off of this tensioner for the AC compressor. And listen, the bearing is completely shot, so we're going to be replacing this pulley as well. Okay, moving back. Suspension's been changed. It's tight. No issues there. It's tight here as well. Completely dry underneath. I don't see any leaks anywhere. We have some, we got a little bit of weepage here, but honestly, it's nothing. This was like that before. I think it might be a rear main, but is it worth doing on this vehicle? I don't think so. Suspension's good. Fuel filter replaced last time. Transmission is dry. This front prop shaft is missing a bolt right there, so we're gonna have to put that bolt in. Okay, moving back, I removed the brake pad sensor for the rear right. This is what it looked like. I don't know if it's supposed to look this way, but the light is on for the brake pad sensor and the brake pads are fine. Could be a damaged connector. The rear diff is leaking. Now, whether it's leaking from around here, this seal, which I doubt, or if it's leaking from the actual, my guess is it's leaking from the here, and it's leaking from both sides, because if it was leaking just there, like you can see, look. See? And as you drive, this blows back, right? So look at the front of it, it's dry. And as you drive, it blows back. When you sit, if you're on an inclined driveway, it could be the seals here as well. I'm going to tidy everything up, clean it up, fill it with new fluid, reseal these, because these probably use thread sealant to seal. And maybe I'll replace the rear axle seals. It kind of looks like they're leaking if you look behind there. So I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this or not. Take a look inside there. Can you see in there? That's the carrier bearing for the prop shaft. See that right there? There we go. So that needs replacing, which would involve another thing that this is also an issue right here. This is your transfer case transmission mount. Take a look. See that? Look at the tearing on the... I'll try to hold it steady. Look. Anyways, it's completely loose. The gasket, though, it's just so worn out. It's just moving like crazy. It's hard to keep it steady. Oh, here, look, watch. Right in there. It's torn. Take a look. Ready? Let's pry it. Do it from this side. Here. There. Look. Okay, something else I found. Okay, take a look at the brake fluid. Yeah, that is disgusting brake fluid. That is not the color of brake fluid. Now take a look at the cap. Take a look at it. That is just nasty. It needs to be flushed out. So something else we might have to do. In typical BMW fashion, we have a gazillion codes for everything. Some of them are probably nothing. So we'll check the most important first, which is the engine. Okay, so we got an oxygen sensor code for catalytic converter upstream oxygen sensor trimming bank 1. Okay, so we got misfire cylinder number 2 and 4. All right, guys, anyone looking to do engine mounts on BMW 3 Series E46, you support the engine up top with a engine mount support. Then when you get to the bottom, you disconnect the rack, 2 bolts, 1, 2, it has a nut on top. You loosen your mounts from the top. That's where the mount used to be, the 2 top mount nuts. There's a bolt here for this mount on the passenger side, and a bolt here which was stripped, so we just cut it off. Then we can lower the 4 subframe bolts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we lower the subframe down using this right here, or you could use a floor jack. Only thing is, if you do it with a jack, you have to support the transmission and engine with a jack as well as the subframe, so you can lower them independently of each other. So it is a little tougher to do it that way. Supporting the engine up top and doing it this way is the correct way. Now I'm going to slide the engine mounts back in. This one is your passenger side mount, and here is my driver side mount. So I'm going to get them in, and then I'll show you guys where we are. All right, guys. So here are the new mounts installed. The nut, 16mm nut, is on top, is installed. The Torx bolt here, and then I found a bolt that fits, not Torx, but doesn't really matter. As long as it goes through and tightens up right there, you're fine. So tightened all these down. When you guys saw I had the cradle across, installed this mount. It goes in through here, spins, and then you can just pry on this subframe to get it into place. So the nut is installed at the top, and this nut is installed here. They're all tight. Subframe bolts are back in. 2, 3, 4. Also, realign the steering rack. There's the bolt, 1, 2, and there is a nut on top, which is a pain to get to. See right there, that nut? You kind of got to feed your hand in there to hold the nut while you tighten it. Same thing with this side. So that's tightened up. So everything's back in place. We can now lower the engine support down, and all the weight will be on the engine mounts, and everything's tightened up. Here's my simple engine support. Hooks onto right there. You just tighten this down until you relieve all the slack off the engine, and as you start pulling it up, and then you can start working on the subframe at the bottom. Easy mounts to replace. All right, guys, so we're draining the coolant now. I just pulled the cooler off the bottom by removing the clip. So the clip is removed. The coolant's now draining out of the rad. I'll let it drain overnight. Right now I'm going to put all this stuff back together because we don't need to do anything else up here. Okay, so I've removed the oil filter, the old oil filter. Here's the oil filter housing. I had it dripping overnight, so we're going to swap the seals on here. Okay, so you take the housing. Always replace this seal. #1 leak on BMWs. People not changing that. Okay. Want to lubricate those as well. Grab your new filter. Sure clips in. If we're using like a little bit of grease, and just roll it over. Okay. Ready to roll. So I leave this like this because I like to pre-fill my actual filter housing for good cold start startups. We're going to lift the vehicle up and we're going to drain the oil. All right, guys, so here's our transmission cooler. We're going to replace these two O-rings. And then we're going to reinsert it back inside. I'm going to lubricate this here. Okay, and then a clip slides back on, which was what we removed. Then we're going to drain the oil, 17 millimeter. Let all the oil drain out. We're going to torque these subframe bolts to 120 Newton meters. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these ones here to 42 Newton meters for the rack. Okay, guys, so O-rings are reconnected. You slide this plastic piece back onto this metal clip that secures the cooler onto the rad, and then you just slide it up and it expands, and then it crimps around there on both sides, and this stays like together. Torque the subframe bolts. Oil filter drain plug is torqued to 18 foot-pounds. New gasket always. The wheels are off because we're gonna bleed the brakes. We just checked all the bleed screws. They're all good. None of them are seized. That's what we're gonna do right now. All right, so we're gonna lower the vehicle down, fill it with oil, get the drain, the oil filter on, torque the housing, and then we're gonna move on to the brake fluid. Okay, so first thing we do is we're gonna pre-fill our housing. We're going with liquid Monley 540. This is the appropriate oil for this BMW. Okay, so we want to pre-fill the housing a bit. Okay, about halfway should do. Everything's pre-lubricated. Ready to put your filter on. Okay, get it started by hand. And you're going to torque this to 18 foot-pounds. So you're going to tighten this to 18 foot-pounds. That's it, not very much. Okay, before we get started on the brake fluid, let's fill the rest of our oil. This takes 6.2 liters. What we're gonna do now is suck up all the old brake fluid from the reservoir using a... So we're gonna use a tool like this. We're gonna suck up all the brake fluid from the reservoir, clean out the reservoir, and then we're gonna fill it up with fresh brake fluid, and then drain all the 4 bleeders and just go do it for half an hour till all fresh fluid is coming out of each side, okay? Now we have here the brake fluid. Take a look at how dirty that brake fluid is. It is brown. So obviously it hasn't been changed ever, and it's 16 years. There's a lot of garbage in here. Take a look. We're also going to clean this now. That's what it looks like inside the reservoir. So we're going to tidy this up. If you take a look at the cap now, completely clean. Reinsert it inside. Clean up the opening. You're not going to be able to get fully inside this reservoir and tidy it all up, but fresh new brake fluid will definitely help the situation. Okay? Okay. Now we're just going to fill it up with new brake fluid. Okay, so when you're bleeding the brakes on any car, you always start with the furthest one from the reservoir, which would be the passenger side rear. So the first thing I do is I clean up I put this on here and I tighten it slightly, lightly, just to break any rust free, and then I loosen. It shouldn't take too much effort. And now I just loosen the bolt and I just wait for the fluid to come. And you can see, there it is, starting to drip. Just let it drip and then get a container and let it drip in the container. There we are. So now this one is flowing. So now you're going to do this for about, you want the reservoir to go about halfway down. Now you know that all the lines are clear. Refill it, close this one, move on to the driver's side rear, repeat the process, move on to the passenger side front, repeat the process, move on to the driver's side front, repeat the process, top up the brake fluid to the correct level in the reservoir, pump up the brake pedal after all the bleeders are tightened, recheck your level because you want to prime the system. And as you press the brake pedal and you get it nice and hard, make sure it doesn't go down, because if it goes down, now you know you left the bleeder loose or you have a leak or air in the system. So just repeat the procedure again until the brake pedal is firm. All right, guys, that's it. Okay, guys, so when you're doing the coolant, there is a little bleeder valve here. So you're going to have it open while you fill the coolant up. So as you're filling it up, you're going to wait for coolant to come out of that hose. You're going to hear air coming out of there. You're going to wait for bubbles to start coming out of there. Okay? I can hear the air. Alright guys, so right now it's been bleeding the brakes for like 20 minutes. It's a slow process because we're just gravity bleeding, but this guarantees no air. You don't need any special tools. Sometimes with pressure bleeders you can introduce air, and sometimes with vacuum bleeders, you gotta buy them. They're expensive. So what we're doing here is we continuously been topping up the brake fluid with our .4 brake fluid, and now I just closed all the bleeders tight, went in the car and pumped the pedal, make sure it's hard. So now we got firm pressure now at the bleeders again. So what we do now is we open the bleeders again and we let it keep dripping again. Okay, so we're gonna do that now. All right guys, so now that we have the vehicle back together, the coolant's topped up, we're bleeding the cooling system right now. The vehicle's running with the fan set on 1, AC off, and highest temperature in the vehicle. So max, but with AC off, okay? Oil change is done. Brake fluid flush is completed. All the bleeders are tightened, cleaned off with brake clean, and the plugs are put back on. So we're gonna bleed this until the radiator thermostat opens and all the bubbles stop. So that could take, the vehicle's gonna have to get up to complete operating temperature. Alright guys, so to remove the airbox is quite simple. 2 tabs here, 1, 2, 2 bolts. Lift this up and the box will come out. And there you have it, along with that front cover intake section that goes here. And now we can get to our idler pulley, which is right there. So the first thing we're going to do is loosen it off. Loosen off the bolt because we have to remove it to replace it. We don't need to move the belt from where it is. We just have to get to that. So that's what we're going to do now. Alright guys, so that's how you want the belt to rest once you remove it. You want it resting underneath the pulley that you remove and underneath the alternator. That'll allow you to remove your serpentine tool, which I have here. And now here's why we're replacing the pulley. Here's your new one. No noise at all. So we're gonna get this back in. Guys, after a few minutes, here is our tensioner reinstalled, our idler. So our idler, first thing you do is put on the idler, tighten the bolt, it's a 16. You slide the bolt in through the fount shroud. Once you insert it inside the idler first, then you push the nut side of it through there, down there, and then you'll be able to slide it in, and it actually holds the alternator. It's an alternator bracket bolt. There is a pin on the idler. It only goes on one way. You'll see it has a little tab here, and it'll have a tab on the actual bracket. Then you use your serpentine belt tool, which is the easiest, to put it on the nut down there. Pull on it, slide it over under the pulley, under the idler pulley here, and then around the alternator belt, and then just make sure that it's on the power steering pump at the bottom as well, so all the entire belt's lined up. Double check everything. And you're done. And now you put the airbox back in, and this job is complete. Okay, here's the airbox. Everything back together. We will be getting some new clips for here, as well as that one there. Gearbox is back in. The two clips around here are on, 1 and 2, and the connector is back on. To release this connector, you just push this tab down and pull out. All right, so once you get the belt off of this pulley, which we did earlier, to replace that pulley and the tensioner, we're just gonna remove this 16 mil bolt. This whole assembly comes out, and then we'll take a look at it. So here's our old pulley. It's just one bolt, and listen. So it's completely damaged. We're just gonna replace the entire pulley with a new unit, and we reuse the old bolt. What I like to do is just coat the bolt in some anti-seize, just some lubricant. Things are dry, you know, we don't want it too dry. It only goes on one way. If you take a look, there's a notch here and a notch right here. Those coincide with these two notches right there. See, 1 and 2. So those will fit in, it'll fit in just like this on here. In those two notches, just like so. See? That's how it's going to look when it's in, and then you put the bolt through. We're using an old belt. I got a good tip from Velocity Garage, German Motor Works, the Car Ninja. He says mark the outside of the belt. You never put belts on in reverse. They could cause noise. So we got the belt on right now. That's our release pin. So what I like to do, I don't want to just pull the pin. So what I do is I get the wrench, put it on here, and then I'll release the pin. So you get your wrench on here, and you're just gonna release the tension. Take a look at the, I'm releasing the tension. Look how it gets loose. Okay, I'm releasing the tension. Now watch. You can pull it out. Now you let that back, and now the belt is tensioned. Take a look. Your belt is on over the crank pulley, around the idler, and around the AC compressor, and now your tensioner is done. That's it. All right, so now we're gonna tackle the front diff. So you have a look. If you have a look in here, you'll see where the fill plug is for the front diff, and there is the drain plug. So we're gonna loosen off the fill plug first in case it strips, because if it strips, then at least we won't have any leaking fluid without being able to put it back on. So cracking the fill plug, and you always want to make sure you have a drain and a seated roll in case it leaks. Okay. Here's our fill, nothing dripped out. Here's our drain. Just gonna let that drain. Wasn't much in there. This is supposed to have 0.6 of a liter. I don't think that's 0.6 of a liter. We will measure after. Once you see no more oil coming out, the drain plug torque with an O-ring, the green O-ring, is 44 foot-pounds. So we just want to tidy this area up. That's it. The fill plug is 46 foot-pounds. We don't do that until we fill it. So right now we just want to tidy this up and we get ready to fill it. So we just can squeeze it in. This liquid moly bottle allows you to squeeze the fluid in. I prefer my tube like this, and I pump it in. I feel like I get all the fluid that way. There you go. And I just pump it in. Done. There you go. Once it starts coming out, just rotate the tires a bit. Grab your drain plug. Put it on there. Grab your torque wrench, 46 foot-pound. Okay, that's torqued. Once that's done, you're gonna tidy up the area, and let's see how much diff fluid was actually in this car. Okay, let's take a reading. That is all the fluid that was in the vehicle. This is 1 liter. So if it takes 0.6, let's say it should be here. That's how much fluid was in the diff. That's how much fluid it should take. Think about it. Okay, we're here at the rear diff. The customer states they put fluid in the car a few years ago. I believe they put the wrong fluid. This takes Hypoid Gear Oil, not gear oil. So there is a slight difference. So first thing you do is take the seal plug out. We were gonna do the seals on this vehicle, but the customer gave us the wrong seals. So we can't, and it's overfilled. Customer overfilled the diff. That could be a reason why it was weeping. This vehicle had a rear diff leak, and it seemed to me like it was weeping very slowly, maybe from the seals. But if you have it overfilled and your fluid is higher than the seals, you can just imagine that once in a while it might leak out, and over time it could cause a mess. So here we are. This should only take 1 liter of fluid. So let's see how much fluid is in here. My guess is more than 1 liter. When the vehicle is on the lift, it is perfectly balanced and leveled. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to get it all the way up here to reduce my mess. All right. Yeah, Hypoid Gear Oil is more of like a clear color, pinkish, not really this color. So what we want to do is want to clean up your gaskets. If you have any black tar on them. I'm not saying running different gear oil will damage the car. I'm just saying if it's not meant to be there, why did you put it in there? You know what I mean? We're gonna let it drain all the way out. Okay, so now that it's finished draining, we put our drain plug on and we applied some thread sealant. All it does is seal the threads from leaking. That's all, and we're going to torque it to 45 foot-pounds. Give it a good wipe. We're just applying thread sealant because the gasket isn't new, and we didn't put a new rubber ring or whatever around it. So just to confirm we don't have any leaks in there, we're going to do that. Next step is we're going to fill it. Same fluid that went into the front diff, Hypoid Gear Oil, 75W90, liquid moly. You can use other brands as well, as long as it's Hypoid Gear Oil. If you can take a look at the color of the fluid, completely different than gear oil. It's more of like a translucent color, and this is what it calls for. This one is empty. Same idea, it takes about 1 liter, so it should almost take this whole bottle. Well, we already put a little bit from the other bottle, so it should take at least 3/4 of this bottle. Here we go. Took just slightly over 1 liter, which is fine. Something else you should do is, when you fill the diff fluid, is just rotate your wheels, and that just helps coat all the gears and get a proper level. So now that we believe, okay, you know, it's draining, we got a proper level, we're gonna get our fill plug and apply some of that sealant, just a little bit. Give it a good wipe. And we'll just turn this, there you go. Torque is 45 foot-pounds. Same idea. Okay. Now we can wipe everything down. And our differential service is complete. We're going to drive it around and see how this diff responds. We want a little bit of time for that solution to seal, to dry, and then we'll see if this vehicle really does have axle seal leaks or not. Okay? Because right now it's super clean. So that concludes this part of the video. We got a couple more things coming up on it, and we're going to do like a compilation on this car. To make your life easier when you're doing the front bank O2 sensor on these vehicles, I recommend taking 1, 2, 3 bolts out and just trying to move this thing out of the way so you can get to the O2 sensor, which is down in there. I'm sure you could get to it. We'll try and get to it. I'll try and get to it without removing this box, and then I'll get back to you. First thing you gotta do is disconnect this connector. This connector here is for the front bank O2 sensor, so you just pry back on those tabs right there, here, and the other side, and it should pry out. This is how an O2 sensor socket works. This was a 22mm O2 sensor socket. This is what you need, deep, so you can get your O2 sensor out because of the wiring. It is easier to remove 1, 2, 3, pull this out of the way. You got all the space in the world to get your O2 sensor out. So I did notice is this O2 sensor was loose. It was not even tight. So we're gonna replace it now anyways and torque it down. Okay, so we screwed in our new O2 sensor by hand, and now we're gonna torque it to 37 foot-pounds, and then we're gonna reinstall everything and come back. All right, guys, that concludes a bunch of work on an E46 BMW. We've been doing work to this car for the past year, and now I'm just showing you some of the things leading up to it and some of the things we did in the past week, which includes a lot of stuff. It's all in the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more of that on this car, comment down below, and more will come.